Hi, almost everyone is watching my channel without a subscription. Please support me and subscribe. I release videos every day for you. Story 1. Ex-husband demands payment of his debts in the divorce and that my property be transferred to him. Okay, sorry in advance for the length. So I'm escaping my abuser. I filed for divorce requesting only what we had agreed on re property and finances, with the sole exception that it's a divorce and not an annulment. He wants an annulment so he can turn around and sue me for damages from his claim that the marriage was somehow under false pretenses. It wasn't. I have no clue where he's getting this, and use the state granting the annulment as proof that he's a victim entitled to damages. The reality is he's trying to use me to cover the $11,000 in credit card debt he somehow accrued behind my back during the marriage. He was trying to threaten and strong-arm me into accepting an annulment without telling me why, but one of his friends spilled the beans on his lawsuit plan, when also trying to threaten me into getting my husband all the property he wants out of the house, including all community property, without question. Because I filed for divorce, he went through on his threats to dump half his debts on me under Arizona community property laws, take my motorcycle, my only transportation. He doesn't have a motorcycle license. This is purely out of spite. Withdraw the offer to pay my moving costs back to where I lived before he brought me out here, on his dime by his choice, and some other petty stuff that's not really legally relevant, going back on previously settled and documented agreements re property. To be clear, this hasn't taken effect yet. It's his response to my divorce petition, but it's him punishing me, and I can even show texts where he threatened he'd do this if I didn't obey him. Submit to an annulment, and even write down exactly what he told me to in response to whatever annulment he chooses to serve me with. Here's the thing though. Among the other types of abuse, he was also financially abusive. We were married for a bit over a year. I didn't get to work except online, where I made a bit over $2,000 last year. He made $100,000. I was only given an allowance of $85 every 2 weeks, and constantly told it was my fault we were poor, we didn't have more, we supposedly struggled to pay bills, etc. I had no idea how much he was making until I did our taxes in February, and I damn sure didn't know about this debt he was hiding until he let it slip while trying to blame me for that too. His lawsuit threat is for $15,000 of damages, which he claims is everything he spent on me. Allowance, half of rent and utilities, health insurance, food, though I was also expected to feed myself, plus cover personal needs with that $85, medication and doctor copays. He knew I was disabled before we even dated, etc. Literally all human needs from the date of our wedding. He's planning to claim his damages because he thinks that taking care of his wife when he agreed to do so prior to marriage and made $98,000 more than her is somehow an injustice. But $15,000 plus half his debts is only, rounding up, $21,000. Under community property laws, I'm entitled to 50% of household earnings. And of course, he's not wanting to split that. Just his debts. The remainder of my half would be $29,000. Is it possible for me to tell the court I would be happy to accept half of his debt, provided I am also entitled to the remainder of my half of the earnings? Because this man kept me in enforced poverty. I have nothing, and when he takes the motorcycle, I won't even be able to work. And I was just accepted to university. I'm trying to get a degree so I can have a career and not get trapped into financial abuse again. And I require a student visa to go as it is in the UK. He also had his friend threaten that, if I didn't do what I was told and give in what I was told, he would essentially bury me in so much debt via lawsuit that I wouldn't get a visa or student loans. This is nothing more than punishing me for leaving him and for telling people he's abusing me. What do I do? Is it possible to respond to his response, telling the court I'm happy to accept all of my half of the community property, and that I'm even willing to give him all the non-cash community property as a kindness? A television and gaming computer worth combined $3,000, and even the motorcycle if it means me getting out of here and not financially ruined. Please do not tell me to get a lawyer. I can't afford one. I would love one, but I don't have the money. I have called every single legal aid group in my county, and all have rejected me without even telling me why. I couldn't get so much as a consult. Law offices aren't calling me back either. I would love a lawyer, but none of my efforts are paying off. Story 2. I, 30F, am starting to resent my disabled sister, 25F. Sorry in advance for the novel. My younger sister Zoe was born when I was 5 years old. I wasn't old enough to understand why everyone had mixed reactions and big emotions when she was born, but would later come to understand that it was not in fact normal for babies to spend the first year of their life in a hospital and have so many surgeries as a baby. Basically, she was born with a really rare genetic condition that left her with minor physical and moderate mental disabilities, and also happens to be autistic. She was my little bud for my whole childhood. I never experienced what some other siblings of disabled children go through as far as resenting the extra attention that child gets or the limitations on our life as a family in terms of adhering to her strict routines and sensitivities. I loved playing with her and making her laugh, and was always fiercely protective of her. As an adult, we're definitely not as close as we used to be. When I moved out a decade ago, I stopped being part of her comfort circle, since she is very particular about who she feels comfortable around. Basically only people in the house that she sees every day. I would still take her to do fun activities when I came home, like the train museum, and to see her favorite movies. Time passes, I get married and start having kids. I currently have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and 10-month-old. I live about 5 minutes away from my parents and am very close, relationally, to my mom. When I had my firstborn, everything was still good. My sister wasn't stoked or anything, but she tolerated having me over to spend time with my parents and didn't seem to mind the baby too much. We would go to parks together and family vacations, and my mom could keep the baby overnight whenever I needed a break. Then my second, Clara, was born. Something about Clara sets my sister on high alert. Clara has been super high energy and loud from birth. Seriously, this girl's lungs are from another planet. Loud, unpredictable noises have always been extremely overwhelming for Zoe, so I can understand why my second-born stresses her out. She acts like a normal toddler. It's just that everything is at high volume. First, it started with, we can't keep Clara for a weekend away, only 24 hours at a time. That's understandable. It was a huge privilege to begin with. Then it became, we can't keep her overnight at all. Still understandable, but tough on me to never have that as an option, especially when my third was born. Then it became, you can't visit 2 days in a row. Now only during specific times of the day, and never for more than 2 hours or so at a time. Now I feel like I'm imposing every time I go to my parents' house. When I'm in the living room, Zoe will either stay in her room and tantrum the whole time I'm there. She'll take all of her clothes out of the dresser and throw them everywhere. Sometimes will randomly scream out, or worse, will come out of her room and scream, scaring my children. There have been a few instances of near violence during Zoe's outbursts, which is why my parents have been limiting our exposure to her. One time when Clara was still a small toddler, she toddled too close to where Zoe was sitting, and Zoe bolted at full speed from her chair to go to her room, but knocked Clara over in the process, which was obviously scary and upsetting to a baby. 2 similar things have happened, Zoe feeling trapped and bolting, but both of those incidents have resulted in adults being body checked out of the way. One was my 70-year-old mother-in-law, and the other was me while I was pregnant with my third. Neither time was Clara anywhere near Zoe. We haven't let that happen since the first incident, but literally just being in the same house as her is apparently just as triggering now. So he usually stays in her room the whole time we're there. But if Clara laughs particularly loudly or plays screams when my dad tickles her, we will hear a ruckus from Zoe's room, which is usually her throwing toys or clothes at the wall. My parents are in over their heads. Zoe has never had behavioral issues like this, but her life has also been very carefully managed and scheduled up to this point. What a realistic solution is, since it seems like her aversion to me and my kids is getting worse by the day. It doesn't make sense for my parents not to be able to come to any events where I'll be with my kids, because they're my parents and my kids' grandparents. Up until I had kids, I was the go-to babysitter for Zoe, so they could do things like go on vacation by themselves. But that's obviously not an option anymore. They also haven't found a babysitter that Zoe is comfortable with, so leaving her home while they come visit me isn't an option yet. If I'm just venting or actually asking for advice, I just needed to get everything off my chest. I'm really starting to resent my sister and even my parents to some extent, even though I understand why they're putting limits on me visiting them. I just had a completely different picture of what my relationship with my parents and kids was going to look like. I wanted us to be able to go on family vacations together, and my kids love visiting their house because of their big, beautiful yard. It's also worth noting that while Zoe has shown an aversion to other small kids before, she doesn't act this way with my older brother's kids at all. My brother's 2 girls are much more reserved and quiet than mine are, though, so I suspect that is the reason behind it. I don't want to give the impression that my kids are some kind of horribly behaved hellions either, though. They're just very energetic and are always on the move, and Clara in particular just has an unusually loud lung capacity for a toddler, So when she vocalizes and laughs like most kids do, it just carries really far. We joke that she's going to be an opera singer when she grows up. I want to be sensitive to the fact that Zoe is autistic and sensory overload is a real thing, but I don't know how to figure out where the line is between being sensitive to a beloved family member with a disability and my right to have a relationship with my parents and my kids to have a relationship with their grandparents is. My parents love my kids and have also expressed that they are frustrated by the situation, but they also don't seem like they know what to do to improve it. Story 3. Should I help my husband pay off his $50,000 credit card debt? My dad recently died and I inherited $100,000. He had cancer, so he had time to discuss what he hoped I would do with the money once he was gone. He was very clear that he didn't want it used for day-to-day expenses. His hope was that it would be either a nest egg for a house someday or a safety net for me and my son in case we decide to leave my husband. There is a very real possibility of divorce in the next few years. I am currently debt-free. It wasn't always this way. I had to learn the hard way and finally just paid off my last credit card in full the week before my dad died. I have learned a lot about money in the 5 years it took me to pay off my debt. I plan to remain debt-free. My husband, on the other hand, is drowning in it, about 2/3 of which was accumulated before we met. He just withdrew his $401 curly and now has $18,000. This is after taxes. He can use towards his debt. Should I pay off the other $32,000 with my inheritance, or some of it? My concern is that he won't learn anything from it and will continue to treat credit cards as money. But at the same time, by not helping to pay it off and trying to teach him a lesson, so to speak, he is spending so much money on interest that could go towards our family. Option 1 is for him to get onto a debt management program where they can call his creditors and have the interest rate lowered significantly. Yes, that will mean he can't use his cards anymore, and it will affect his credit score. He's okay with that, and then we can use his $401 money for the monthly payments. There would still be interest that way, but not as much of a crippling amount. Option 2 is that we pay it all off in full using his $401 money and my inheritance. Option 3. Pay off the highest interest rate cards and do debt management program for the rest of the credit card debt. If our marriage had a stable foundation, I likely wouldn't think twice about paying it off in full. But things are very rocky between me and my husband. Do I really want to use a good chunk of the money my dad left me to help him when we may not even be together anymore in a couple of years? What would you do if you were in my shoes? UPV80TV. Thank you everyone for your comments, insight, and concern. I have decided to go with option 1. I will give him the $8,000 that covers my half of what he has spent on our son, and keep the rest locked away in a high-interest account. To those concerned that I could be responsible for half his debt in the case of divorce, or that he could get half the inheritance, there's nothing to worry about. I have already done the research and where I live, this is not the case. When I give him the $8,000 for his debt, I will not do so directly from the account that holds the inheritance. I will transfer it to myself first at another bank/account, and then to him from there. Therefore, the inheritance money will not be directly mixed with marital money. My dad wanted to know that me and my son would be taken care of, and I will be honoring that. Thanks again, everyone. Story 4. AITA for calling my MIL on my fiance. My fiance, I'm 22, was injured over a month ago and had surgery to correct things literally 2 days after the accident. I, 21F, have been by his side the entire time. I have more or less become his caregiver. In the last month, I have taken over the role of keeping our house together. I cook all the meals. I take care of the pets. I stayed up all night to tend to his endless needs. I take him to the bathroom. I have been working remote. I haven't left the house for more than an hour since the accident, aside from taking him to and from appointments. I am not saying this to complain. I am grateful that my life allows for me to support him the way I have. My problem is his attitude. He was given very strong painkillers for the first 2 weeks after surgery. He had to extend his time on them and recently stopped taking them in the last week. When he was taking them, he thanked me, told me how much he loved me, apologized at every step, though he didn't need to. Without the meds, he doesn't seem to see that I am helping him. Every dish I bring him is the wrong one. He will yell for me, and when I come he will tell me to fuck off. If he's in pain, he expects me to fix it. I am exhausted. I can't do anything right, and it is wearing on me. I haven't slept in weeks. I haven't seen a friend or family member in way too long. I can't even be on the phone for more than 10 minutes without it being an issue. After days of what turned into verbal abuse, I called my MIL. I told her everything as soon as I saw he was asleep. I cried for about 15 minutes. I felt terrible unloading on her like that, but I had so much built-up frustration I just couldn't stop. She was very supportive on the phone, let me know I wasn't wrong to feel like that, and let me cry. After hearing everything, she was furious and ended our call to talk to her son. She tore him a new asshole. I heard him trying to defend himself through the door, but it was mostly just stammering. She flew up yesterday and put me up in a nice hotel. I haven't heard much from my fiance since I left, but as I was leaving he was yelling at me for calling his mom. He said he didn't want to marry someone who couldn't be there for him in sickness. I told him I loved him and I was sorry, I'm just so tired. He didn't care, just told me to go, and his mom could do a better job for him than I ever could. So now I'm in my way too nice hotel room, feeling like a major ah. I need to know if I am wrong here. Edit. He began weaning off 2 weeks ago and became fully dependent on over-the-counter medication this week. He did not stop taking them cold turkey. His doctors were heavily involved too, due to previous drug abuse. Update. MIL is taking him back to their hometown once they can get flights together. I'll stay in this hotel until then. Fiance doesn't want to talk yet, and I don't blame him. He knows what's coming, and that I am pissed. I'll go visit him in a week, so I have until then to decide how I want to move forward. My mother called last night about a venue she found in my hometown, and I told her what's going on. She doesn't want to spend a bunch of money on a pending divorce, so we are stepping back from planning. Not much more to add. I'm excited to see my pets and be able to sleep in my own bed. I'm going to try to make my sister fly to my state so I can have some company. That's pretty much it. I'm in serious awe about how I let my life get like this, but oh well, today will be better. Update. I went home 2 days after posting. Things were sad. My mill had cleaned, but the energy in the house was a bummer. The first thing he said to me when I got back was, "I'm glad you're back. Can you make me a snack?" There was no apology, no accountability, just a task. He only talked to me when he needed something. His attitude was worsening. My mill took the rest of he prescribed opiates, so I knew he wasn't using. The weekend following the MIL debacle, my wonderful fiancé told me he had friends coming to stay for the weekend. 2-hour heads up. Didn't ask. I sighed and made up the guest room. His friend and friend's girlfriend came to stay. During this stay, my fiancé bought me flowers, got out of bed daily, took me out, and let me call my parents unsupervised. The day they left, he was back to bed with a shitty attitude. I wish I could say I am in my own apartment with my pets and a bottle of rosé that's just for me. Or with my girlfriends that I haven't seen in months. Unfortunately, I'm writing this on the couch while I listen to the music that are his endless demands. However, I do have a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm scared to leave him in person, but he's leaving the country for a month in April. My sister lives abroad, and I'm working on getting to her during that month. It's a process, especially with pets. I look forward to getting there. My mother hasn't spoken to me since I told her I was returning the ring because that's not what we do. We clean our messes. But I have my father's unwavering support. I'll miss my MIL, but I deserve that kindness and understanding from my partner, not his mother. I have stopped forcing myself to find the joy in his presence, and it's helping to fuel my drive to get out of here. I may update again when I get to my sister, but don't be surprised if I do my best to put this chapter behind me. Update and a comment on this post. Why isn't he with his mom? MIL was planning on taking him, he refused. Things got very bad since I posted this. I'm currently in my childhood room at my father's, decently hungover, and I am officially a single lady. Update about calling her parents unsupervised. I called my sister once when I was scared of him a while back. She called the police. He liked to be in the room when I was talking to family following that incident, so I didn't say anything dramatic. I should have seen how bad it was. Typing that out just feels gross. More about what happened. I don't want to get too into it, but we had a bad night. It ended with me locked on the balcony. I still have some bruising. I was able to call my father on my watch, and we made a plan to get me home the next morning. Are you and your pets safe? Yep, I'm with my dad now. They are? They aren't in my arms yet, but I should get them back in the next week.